won't surfing this winter. I've never been. I drove past your parents' house.
welcome. Hope you're all keeping well. We're going to be having a look at a game here called Starlancer, and we're going to be going and having a chat about some of the UFO stuff as well. But before we go and get out there and do our missions, we're going to be going and have a look and getting a room 1, because I need to heal up. How is everyone though? Hope you're keeping very, very well. It's cold outside. I'm just going to have to close the back door very quickly. Go and get this video loaded up as well.
State as it comes, as authorities continue to investigate several reported drone sightings throughout our area in the last month. Fox Eyes' Lisa Evers is live in Mahwah, New Jersey with a
1 second, sorry, Stram.
Residents and lawmakers there. Lisa.
Well, Bianca, the calls for action about the number of drones flying in the skies here in New Jersey.
Okay, let's go and give a second window open where we can see this on. Add window capture. Create new YouTube window. Here we go.
And New York is growing, as are the frustrations of local and state officials who can't seem to get any definitive answers from Washington. Now, with the busy air travel season upon us, there are great concerns about airline and air safety in general. Hundreds of sightings of drones appearing at night in the skies over New Jersey and New York for more than a month. Sometimes they're solo, but other times there are dozens of them, even flying in organized formations. Witnesses say they range in size, all of them unexplained. Some have been sighted over military installations and near airports. Over the weekend, Stewart International Airport in Orange County, New York, had to be temporarily shut down due to a safety threat from drone activity. Officials say the drones do not show up on the regular FAA flight radar screens, and Senator Chuck Schumer is asking Homeland Security to deploy drone detection technology, similar to what's been used to prevent airstrikes by birds. But New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer has had enough. He's just moments ago, short time ago, he's calling on the feds to come clean. Here's what Gottheimer had to say.
Later today, I'll be introducing a resolution in Congress calling on the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the FAA, the lead agencies, to publicly brief on what they know about the drones. Not a paper statement, but actually get out there and do a proper public session where they review what they know and take questions. I believe the people who I represent, and as I've been saying for some time, the people in New Jersey, around the country, deserve clear answers.
Soundbite? Yeah. Now, just a short time ago, President Trump held a press conference in which he addressed the drone situation. Here's what President-elect Trump had to say.
The government knows what is happening. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy, because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out. Even if they were late, they'd blast it. Something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people. And
Now, the frustrations of the regular residents here who have to deal with this, not knowing what they're going to see in the skies or where they are, as well as the statements made by many people, professional law enforcement here on a state level, as well as military.
So we're going to be having a look at one
vehicle retrieval system.
Drone sightings is also intense.
one video afterwards after this.
Following this story very closely for you, so keep it locked here on Fox 5 and the Fox Local app. We're live in Mawa. I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News. Bianca, back to you.
Yeah, the lack of clarity and uncertainty sure is certainly frustrating. Lisa, thank you for the update on that.
So we know that
Let's
we
bring
got
in Republican Tennessee Congressman Tim Burton.
another video here. Sorry, I'm just looking at the missions as well at the same time on this game. Let's have a look.
Is that what they call themselves? Those people up there have had quite a few unidentified aerial phenomena. And
it's the moon.
They have shared a video. One of the news anchors shared it of these anomalous creatures. Casmo, you might even recognize this because I think you've been to this planet. Here we go.
Look at it.
Oh my God, it's a helicopter.
There it is. It's so close, and it's going so.
More large drone sighting. This one recorded over media. I've heard helicopters be called a lot of things, but drone is a little insulting, don't you think, Casmo?
Yeah. I mean, well, is that a helicopter drone? I don't know. I can't tell.
No, it's like a AW-169 from the New Jersey State Police.
Well, if it's well, if it's the aliens, man, at least they have their strobes and nav lights on.
Yeah, it's good of them to, acclimate to FAA regulations.
I mean, if you're gonna
get you no matter where you go, yeah.
If you're gonna try to blend in, with us lowly Earthlings, let's put lights on these things.
That's funny, guys.
Check in with center.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they get stuck behind the Southwest 737 on the Star.
Right, yeah. What are the rock reports?
Yeah.
Go.
Dude, I don't know what I was stuck behind the other day. We were leaving Toronto for some
Agricultural supplies.
I don't know what we were stuck behind, but we were just plotting.
Wasn't that one? We needed it one where we can get.
We're always at like 8-0. We're like,
Was that one, wasn't it?
can we go higher? Like, what is that?
Let's go back to Magnus Gateway.
10 minutes to catch up to him. I was like looking over the nose, trying to figure out what it was.
Probably some American guy on a premium trip. He's like, "Well, slow her down."
Yeah, slow her down.
Slow her down.
You mean Delta.
Or Delta.
Here's another one, another New Jersey drone sighting. He left.
Enhance. My God.
The aliens are flying Airwolf.
Dude, they're beaming.
here.
Hey, they're beaming something up or down.
Cattle. They're anally probing cattle right there.
Whole life. It's a large drone.
Silly gravity. We can't. Ugh.
Yeah.
No, you guys had that here.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I
A
mean,
lot of these are just terrible videos, to be fair.
nav lights and strobe lights. Probably man-made.
What was it? What did they say in the Navy, Gaki? If you see red,
Red right returning, right? Is that it?
red right return.
Green red, you're dead, right?
Yeah.
Red right returning. Yeah.
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 That's all
basic.
I really remember. Yeah.
It's basic stuff.
I always do this. I go in this side now rather than the actual easiest side.
Like, there's a lot of these people that are like now filming all of the air traffic because we're all it's idiocracy, right? And that's fine because social media allows us to make fun of them. But the problem I have is there's a former KC-10 guy that I follow. It's like 737 Wrangler or something. And he was he posted somebody's tweet or X or whatever they call it now of threatening chemtrails. He's like, kill me an airline pilot I see that's, chemtrailing out there. Them guys, they ain't going to do that in mine. And so that we're just a step away from people popping off rounds at airliners
Well, it's already happening, right?
Yeah. No, I think we're already there, dude.
We don't
among us.
That was a bad one. Sorry about our video there, guys.
At the displays with the FLIR and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's
Sure.
I can't explain that.
I mean, the only thing that turns me off to the whole thing is like these things can travel all this way, but then they keep crashing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they haven't figured out the landing part yet, but everybody else is
Spatial, dude, they get into night IMC, Casmo, and I mean,
they've not.
The Joe Rogan experience.
So
Let's see what Joe Rogan show's saying about it.
Interacting with a lot of government organizations over the past few years as I've been digging down this rabbit hole. Law enforcement at a federal level, DOD, executive branch, legislative branch, and some of the folks that I've come in contact with, they specifically work on weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so that's their job. So if there's a loose nuke in the United States, among other agencies, they would be some of the people that would be sitting in a skiff for 24 hours a day trying to figure out where it is and to go get it, right? So you can imagine that would be their number one priority, right? So I engage with these folks. I ask them, you know, what's the sense here? You know, people are kind of starting to panic a little bit, and this message is getting out there more and more broadly. And they assured me that's not the case, that there is not a loose nuke or other type of weapon of mass destruction that these objects, whatever they are pursuing right now. Otherwise, they would be working in a skiff nonstop to make that go away, that problem go away. So, you know, that's part of why I have a high confidence level that this is not a response to a massive imminent, you know, weapons of mass destruction threat on the eastern seaboard. So I just want to try to dispel that rumor right now. I've seen a lot of talk of that online, and I don't...
Initiate jump on my mark.
You know, I think a dangerous and a scary situation that's going on.
Engage jump.
From that particular angle, that's not the indications I'm receiving.
So, how would they persuade?
Hyperspace jump pod.
Or have they given you any information that leads to this conclusion? Like,
they would be the people actively working it, essentially, right? So,
and they're not
working it, right? So either the government is holding back that secret from the direct resources within the government that are responsible for finding these systems.
Cancelled.
Or they're not working the issue because there isn't an issue there to work.
So the thing that I had heard was that it was a missing nuke from Ukraine. And if that was the case, what could they do? Is there any truth to this idea that we have the type of drone capability that we could send these things out and they would search for gamma radiation and they'd be able to find a nuke? Is that?
So there are teams that respond to those types of potential emergencies, typically within the Department of Energy. Having, you know, potentially hundreds of drones flying around trying to identify these isn't necessarily the best way. Gamma radiation is typically well shielded in weapons, and at very high altitudes or even moderate altitudes like we're seeing these objects, it would be pretty difficult to detect them. And the way that NIST, DOE typically operates in this environment is ground-based teams searching for radiation.
Engage jump.
So it's not necessarily consistent with how they would do it to
Jump.
begin with. And then based off of that other information, that's what leads me to believe that's not the case.
Well, that makes me feel better because I was freaking out this weekend.
I think a lot of people were.
Yeah, I got a couple. But it's one of those things, especially in this day and age with social media. There's so many narratives that get spread and retweeted. And, you know, I know a guy who's an insider and he says to get out of the East Coast and, you know, head for Nevada or, you know, there's a lot of that shit going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different versions of these drones, and this is what's weird. If they weren't ours, if they're not ours, you would think that they could just track them and find out, well, where are they landing, who's got them, how are they being used, is it RFI, like radio frequency, is it some sort of a different technology that's allowing them to pilot these things, like what is it?
Yeah.
They'd be able to tune into that and figure it out, right? So how come no one's been arrested? How come no one's been caught? How come they haven't, you know, tracked these things down to the source?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good questions there. Let me back up by starting with the fact that this started about 2 years ago, at least. So
But not like this.
a little bit like this.
Really?
So,
In this volume?
not in this volume. That's the differentiator right there. But so Langley Air Force Base, you might be familiar with the fact that they had drone incursions of an unknown type, unknown origin last year.
Right.
That happened during about a 2.5, 3 week period right before Christmas. Right where we are now. That also happened the year before over Langley. Unknown objects operating over the base. They couldn't tell where they were going. They were unprepared for them. Same period of time, 2-3 weeks before Christmas. This is year 3, right? And they were expecting them to come again for third year in a row over Langley. And there was, some effort put forward to be able to better understand these when they came back. And they did come back, but they came back in a much wider swath, right? Now we have them all over New Jersey, all the way up to Massachusetts. And it's hard to tell exactly with the quality of the reporting right now, because it seems to be, the bigger the story gets, the more people are just looking up and seeing anything and pointing it out. But there are reports from Texas to Florida to California, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's not just New Jersey itself, it seems. And even the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was shut down for a drone incursion just this last Friday, a couple days ago. So this isn't just a one-off event. It is in the sense that it's so large and so many people are paying attention to it. But this has been occurring for at least 3 years around military bases, and that's nothing to say with the incidents that we were seeing over the Eastern Seaboard and other training ranges that fighter pilots were seeing as they were doing their operations. So I'm a little hesitant to link it to the full story that we've been having here, this full conversation, but at least for 3 years this has been occurring. So, kind of getting back to your question, why can't we do more about it? It's a hard problem, I think, for a number of reasons. It's hard, but it's very solvable, right? I think this can be solved. We can solve it. But right now, kind of the word on the street is that these objects appear to be coming from over the ocean. There's senior congressmen, there's Coast Guard personnel, there's law enforcement. They're seeing a large number of these come from somewhere over the ocean. I don't know if that means necessarily they're popping out of the water physically, or if they're coming from some unknown location in the water and then proceeding over the coast. I don't know how that relates to Ohio. That's a pretty long trip if they are coming over the ocean. And from the videos I've seen and the conversation I've had, they are detecting these objects through kind of normal mechanisms like radar systems, optical camera systems. They are flying very low. In some cases, they seem to be operating as a group in the vicinity of each other, flying past each other, flying very up close to each other, and then proceeding to do whatever they are that they're doing. It's an unknown right now if they are emitting energy or not. So, like radio communications or their own maybe active sensor systems. It's unknown. I've poked on that front, and the best I can tell, the government doesn't know either.
That seems so weird that they don't know that. Like, it's just disturbing that someone could operate these things and have, how many, what is the estimated number of them?
That's a great question. At this point, I'm comfortable making a guess of probably over 800 or 1,000. And how many of those are sightings of the same object? How many of those are individual objects? How many of those are unique objects that? Right. So it's tough to say, but this isn't just a few objects that people are seeing.
That's a big number. That is a big number, chap.
So I can imagine some technologies that will allow traditional UAVs or drones to operate without emitting, right? So they could be, they could have a self-contained navigational system, right? Maybe they have their own onboard maps and they're using cameras to map where they are.
So then they would be completely autonomous. You just send them out there and they would have a task and they would go through whatever their task is and navigate via their GPS or whatever tracking system they're using.
Exactly. And
DJI have it already.
Is their task, right?
Right.
Is it just to instill panic and fear? Is it because they're sensing something? And if they are sensing something, they would have to be using what's called passive sensors, right? So like a camera system is passive, but if you're shooting a radar out and having it bounce off of something, that's active, right? And that's easier to detect than a passive system. So I could imagine, a fully self-contained autonomous drone system that is doing something potentially with passive sensors that allows it to operate without emissions, which is going to make it harder to track.
If they're doing it at night, if they do have passive systems, like some sort of an optical system, wouldn't that be hindered by the low light conditions, or do we have stuff that is able to detect whatever they're looking for at night?
Yeah, depends what they're looking for, but ultimately there is tech. There's electro-optical systems, there's infrared camera systems, not unlike the jets or the systems that we had on my jet. But we were able to detect these objects with infrared when we were flying off the eastern seaboard. There are a number of reports from law enforcement that their infrared systems are not able to pick these objects up. And not just this year, but also the incidents over Langley last year. The pilots that responded to that incident, I've spoken to them, they weren't able to lock these up with their infrared systems either. So they do seem to be exhibiting some type of signature management.
That's interesting. So is the signature management so is it a heat signature that they're giving off? So that maybe there's some sort of a cooling mechanism inside of these things? Like how, if they have a propulsion system, so you would imagine it's some sort of an electric engine, right? Because a lot of them are very quiet. That's got to be giving off some kind of heat, right?
Yeah, and that goes to some like very base physics, right? Like we create heat whenever we have, stored energy and we utilize it. So to be able to mitigate that to such a degree that you can't even detect them at all, it's pretty tough. I mean, I can imagine you can reduce your signature. We do it in fighter jets, right? Through kind of just like baffles where we cover the engine essentially to make it harder to see. But to have zero ability to detect or lock onto these objects is not a technology I'm familiar with.
So other than that, are they exhibiting any type of movement that's extraordinary, or their ability to turn angles? Is there anything about them that points to this being superior technology?
It's tough to say. Based on what I've seen just in the public from reports and kind of amateur photographers and witnesses, some of them do seem to be making pretty sharp turns. I wouldn't call them like physics breaking turns, but they don't seem to be operating like a normal aircraft, right? So they're down low, they're making what appear to be pretty high G turns, maybe like 3, 4, 5 G turns at relatively low airspeeds, which is indicative of them having a pretty significant power supply, right? Anytime you turn like that, you're burning energy essentially. So for them to be able to make these high G maneuvers and then remain in the area for another 5 or 6 or 7 hours and still have the battery life or whatever's propelling them, to then go over the ocean to a point where they're untrackable. Again, I'm not really familiar with that type of capability either.
Yeah, it's the thing that disturbs me is not just that this is happening, there's so many drones and all these people are seeing them. It's happening for so long and nothing has been done. There's no, they're not scrambling jets to try to meet these things and follow them and track them. They're not shooting them down. They're not. It's just we appear so vulnerable because of this. Mm-hmm. Because if these are ours, or if these are people just fucking around and it's not a threat, okay, great. But why is it so prevalent? Like, why are there so many of them, and why have there been nothing that these people that are trying to investigate this have been able to do that's effective to put a stop to this?
So there's some laws in this country that are a little bit antiquated when it comes to dealing with situations like this. So my understanding is right now these things are operating mostly in what's called Class G airspace, which is really low. It's away from airports. Not all, of course, right? They're over bases. So
they're over LaGuardia.
Yeah. But here's I think where a lot of the trouble's coming in from. I think the government has to make the presumption at this point, based off the feedback from the DoD and others, that if this is not a foreign adversary, then we have to make the assumption that it's a U.S. citizen that's operating these. Because of that, they essentially need a warrant in order to wiretap these.
What?
Yeah.
Even with the Patriot Act?
That's the feedback I'm receiving. That's the legal limitation.
Come on. They don't even need a warrant to get into my phone. Get the fuck out of here. I don't buy that.
Well, whether it's the reality situation or not, that's how they're proceeding, right? And so to overcome that, there's like a 120-page report that needs to be filed all the way up to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States in order to even intercept these signals that they may or may not even be emitting, to be able to determine where they're going. And so I think that's one part of what's like slowing down this whole investigation. On the other hand, for base commanders, they have limited authorities to protect their base, but when they do, they need to submit basically a request all the way up to the Secretary of Defense. All right, so now you have this like super politically charged situation with a lot of risk of objects flying over the U.S. If they take action and shoot one of these down, even with the Secretary of Defense's permission, you know, they're on the hook if that thing takes out a school bus or otherwise damages someone's property.
Or kill somebody.
Yeah.
Jamie, can you just do a quick search? Have there been drones that have been shot down?
I haven't seen anything. I was there's a story from what today is this? 2 days ago. New Jersey lawmakers were having a press conference asking if the government could shoot one down so they can inspect it. So, like, I'm assuming they haven't shot one down if they're asking to shoot one down that day, you know?
The Joe Rogan Experience.
So, what year was your incident? And you have a very, very famous incident that's corroborated by actual evidence, which is one of the rare ones. What year was it, and where did it take place?
So it was 2004, November 14th. It's really, if you draw San Diego to Ensenada, Mexico, we're about 60 miles off the coast in between the two. We're doing workups, so when we get ready to deploy, this was for the 2005 deployment. We were going at sea for November and December of 2004. So we had been out. I had just taken over the squadron mid-October, so I had been the CO for a month. So we go out and we're putting the battle group pieces together. So it's not just the air wing, but we're on the.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's actually crazy.
Support ships out there, and we're going to integrate all the defenses and train as one unit. So the exercise that we're going to do is an air defense exercise where there's good guys, bad guys. They're all from the air wing. So the bad guys today are going to be the Marines, VMFA 232, the Red Devils. So they're going to launch and they're going to go about 100 miles south of the ship, and we're the good guys, and we call it a 2v2, so it's 2 of us against 2 of them. And we're going to work with the USS Princeton, which is going to be the controller, and they're going to control the blue forces, and then the red guys are going to give us a presentation that, you know, they're going to try and intercept so we can stop them from getting up towards the carrier. So that's kind of the training set that we're all good. So the Marines take off first, and they start heading to the south. Now, we have no idea that for 2 weeks, the 2 weeks we've been at sea, they've been tracking these things coming out of the sky. And when I talked to the Princeton controller, he's like up to about a dozen of them. They would come down from above 80,000 feet. They'd drop down to about 20,000 feet. They'd hang out, and then they'd go straight back up after about 3 or 4 hours.
Now, when you say they've been tracking them, who specifically?
This is the USS. The Princeton was tracking them. They saw them on the Nimitz radar, and the E-2 could see them. Because they're out there, you know, that radar's on all the time. And the Spy 1 system on an Aegis cruiser is, you know, is probably one of the most sophisticated systems in the world.
So typically when something like this happens and there is some unexplained phenomenon, what do they do?
In this case, you know, if we were in a threat environment, they would tell us. But we're off the coast of San Diego. It doesn't come to the air wing, so we have no idea that these things are out there at all.
So they observe these things, and they never bothered telling any of you guys.
That's correct.
So they just knew that these things had been visiting this area,
yes,
but they just allowed this training exercise to take place anyway.
Yeah, talking to them, for the 2 weeks, they would show up, but it was when we weren't flying. So the typical carrier schedule is, you know, for us, it was about noon to midnight. It's a 12-hour day. There's reasons for that. It can go a lot longer, but for training, we just do the 12-hour day thing. And it's cyclic ops, so you got guys taking off and landing periodically. So we were on one of the first goes, you know, it's, you know, noon, 1 o'clock, somewhere around there, and we take off. The Marines take off first, and my buddy Cheeks, who
request landing permission.
Leading the Red Air, when he launched off the carrier first, they called him up and said, "Hey,
docking request code sent."
The original legacy F-18s don't have as much gas as the Super Hornets. Super Hornet's about 30% bigger. So they start talking to him about fuel, and based on how long we're going to be airborne and everything else, they go, "Hey, why don't you just go ahead and proceed to your cap point?" Because we had just taken off. And that's when the controller had come up and said, "Hey," I forget our call sign, it's probably like dealer is usually what we went. So that'd be like dealer 11, this is Princeton Control. What do you got? You know, say your loadout. And I kind of chuckled. I said, well, I got a CATM-9, which is basically just a blue metal tube with a seeker head for an AIM-9 IR missile. It's a training. It doesn't come off the airplane. You can beat it with a sledgehammer. That's the only way you're going to get it off, or you got to unlock the lugs with a key. So I'm like, kind of chuckling. He goes, well, hey, we're going to cancel the training. So we're like, okay. He says, we got real world vector, and they're going to send us out to the west. So picture if it's, you know, if you got a clock, the Nimitz is in the middle. We're a little bit south of that, about 40 miles south, and then the Marines are about 100 miles south of the ship. About 60 miles between the two of us. So as this is all happening, my wingman is joining up, and these are F-18F, so there's two people.
Deploy landing gear?
It's me and my WIZO, which is weapon systems operator, and I've got the other pilot and the weapon systems operator in the other jet. So they tell us all this, hey, we're going to real-world vector.
Lowering gear.
70, about 60 miles away from where we're going, so now we're going out even further out to sea. We have no idea what we're intercepting, and this is when the controller starts talking to us. He says, hey, sir, we've seen these objects. They've been, for 2 weeks, they've been coming down, and he's giving us the whole story. He says, we need you to go investigate. We want to know what these are. So
but they're asking you to investigate in a jet that's unarmed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no, and there's reasons for that we don't fly. We typically don't fly with live ordnance unless we're actually going into like a combat zone or we're on a training range and we're going to shoot something. And the reason is you can go through history of the Navy or Repair Force. If you put live missiles on airplanes and then you start doing training where you're squeezing the trigger, someone always messes the switchology up and someone gets shot down. It's happened multiple times. So we don't do it. You know, there's times that we do, but it's rare. So we start flying out to the west. Now I want you to think, because the other pilot has a, you know, when you talk to, it's out there, it was a female. When you talk to her, it's, here's the, kind of goes through the mindset of, hey, we're off the coast of Mexico, real world vector, we have no idea what we're going to look at. Probably drug runner, because you get the drug runners coming up the coast. So we're like, okay. So we drive out and they're calling down ranges. So they're telling us, hey, it's 270 at 30 miles at 20,000 feet. And it's, you know, and then you just count down the ranges. And we're talking back and forth the whole time. So they got to a point where they say, hey, merge plot, which means radars have resolution cells, you know, range and azimuth of what the radar can actually see. Once you're inside that box, you can't tell the difference between me and the object I'm going at. We're just become one big blob.
Why is my internet going slow when we're watching this shit? They're after me.
Left-hand side. And I'm gonna go to a clock code to make it simple. So the object we're gonna end up looking for is right in the middle of the clock. And we are at the 6 o'clock position. And my wingman is off to my left side, so she's further down with her WIZO. So as we're looking around, we look to the right, and there's yesterday was a perfect example out here. The water is perfectly calm, no white caps. I mean, it's literally a perfect San Diego, California day. And we see white water, something like if you see a seamount, you know, rock underwater when you're standing on the shore and the waves are breaking over it, and you're like, what is that? It's usually because there's a rock under the water. So it looks like that, but it's about the size of a 737. It actually kind of has a shape of like a cross, and it's pointing to the east. So you got the long part going east-west, and you got a couple of things going north and south. So as we're looking at it, because that kind of draws our eyes, we're like, oh, that's kind of odd. We look down, and the WIZO in the other airplane comes up and says, hey, skipper, do you? And that's about what he gets out of his mouth, and I'm kind of looking at the same thing. I go, dude, do you see that? What is that thing? And what we see is this white tic-tac looking object just above the surface of the water, pointing north-south, and it's going north-south, east-west. It's just radically moving forward, back, left, right at will. And it's moving around the disturbance, the white water that we see.
How big is this thing?
So, over time, it's about 40 feet long. And the way I estimate that is, I mean, I got a lot of time fighting other airplanes, so it's about the size of a Hornet fuselage, so that's why I say 40 feet. And this thing's just going left. So the first thing you see when you look down, you go, and this is with our eyes, it's not sensors, right? So we're looking down at this thing, and first thing you think is helicopter, right? Helicopters typically stay below 200 feet when we're out there, and they're just driving around. We're pretty far away from the ship for a helicopter for one of ours. So what is it? So the first thing you look for is rotor wash. You know, if you've watched any TV show that starts kicking the water up, you can see that. It's really easy to see from the air. So we're like, no rotor wash. Matter of fact, don't see any rotors. Don't see any tail rotor. Don't see any, you know, the main rotors. We're like, that's kind of weird. So as we're driving around, we're looking at this thing. We get to about the 9 o'clock position.
How far away are you from this thing?
I'm at 20,000 feet, and it's right down on the surface, right off our right side, so I'm probably maybe a couple miles lateral. 20,000 feet, and we're just watching it move around. And
so it's very small in your eyes.
Not overly small. I mean, an airplane down that low, it's 40 feet. You can see pretty well. It was pretty clear. So I'm like, okay. So I said, I'm gonna go check it out. And that's what we're trained to do. The other pilot says, hey, I'm gonna stay up here. And I'm like, that's perfect. So now we'll get some separation. We'll get it from different views. And the other airplane will kind of have a God's eye view of everything that's going on as I go down and check this thing out. So I start driving around, and it's still doing its forward, back, left, right. It's still pointing north-south. We get to about the 12 o'clock position. I'm just in a nice, easy descent. And a reason, because I've been asked, can you go more aggressive? You can, but when you're out over water, the water looks the same at 20,000 feet as it does at 2,000 feet. You don't, so you can easily put yourself in a non-recoverable position if you're not paying attention and you go into the water. So I got this nice, easy descent. I get to about 12 o'clock, and as I'm coming down, I could guess probably about, 18,000 feet now, a couple thousand feet below the other airplane. The tic-tac just kind of rapidly goes boop and turns, so now it's kind of pointing east-west, and now it mirrors us. So it's above the surface, we're up high, we're coming down, it starts coming up. I'm like, well, this is getting interesting. So we kind of drive all the way around a circle, I'm descending, it's coming up, and I get over to about the 8 o'clock position on the clock, and it's over at about the 2 o'clock position. Well, the quickest way, as we know as kids, to get someone, you can keep going around the circle, nothing's going to happen. You cut across the circle. So I'm about, I don't know, probably 2,000 to 3,000 feet above it, and I just kind of drop my nose aggressively, and I cut across the circle, and it's coming this way. It's because I'm trying to fly to where it's going to be, because I want to join on it. I want to see how close I can get to it.
Right.
And as I'm pulling up, it's kind of starting to cross my nose, and it starts to accelerate, and within about less than a second, as I start to pull nose onto it and it crosses right in front of me, it just goes poof, and it's gone. So I call the other airplane, I said, hey, do you guys see that thing? And they're like, sir, it's gone. We don't see it at all. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. So we don't see it, we're looking. At the same time, I say, hey, let's turn around and let's go back to see what was in the water. Was there something there? So we turn around, we're right there. We haven't gone anywhere. It's gone. Water's perfectly, there's no white water, nothing, it's just blue. I'm like, okay. So we turn back around, now we're heading back out towards the east, and I tell the controller, I said, I first said, I'm kind of weirded out, and I told my backseater that. And we start heading back, and the controller on the Princeton comes up and he says, sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is back at your cap point. That was our original point where we were going to hold 40 miles south of the ship. So this thing has went from wherever we were at to, about 60 miles in, maybe 30, 40 seconds. It's already over there. And they didn't track it, it just appeared. It shows back up on the radar, and they go, it's here. So we're like, okay. So we fly back, we don't see it. We don't see it on our radar. We don't see it on any of our sensors. We do like 2 runs, and we come back to the ship and land. So as we're in we call it the PR shop, we're taking off our flight gear. One of my crews is getting ready to go out, and I think they were going to be on a tanker mission, but they had a targeting pod on board. So they launch off, and we're telling them about this before, and the backseater, Chad says, he's really determined, he's going to find this thing. So he tells the pilot, hey, we're going to find this thing. So they're just out driving around, and in the back seat of a Super Hornet, there's no stick, but there's side stick controllers, and they're to control the sensors, because that's what the weapon systems guys do. And they can change displays really fast by just hitting a button, and it'll flip from the radar to the targeting pod. And the way the system actually works is when you see something on the radar and you designate it as your primary target, all the other sensors will look at that point. So everything is kind of synced together. So he picks up a hit on his radar, and he goes to lock it up, because I watched all the tapes. He goes to lock it up, and immediately the radar can tell, it gets signals back that it's being jammed. So, and technically jamming is an act of war. It starts jamming the radar, goes into a jam extrapolate, a bunch of stuff happens on the scope. Well, he's smart enough to castle to his targeting pod, and he takes a passive track, and that's the video that you see of the Tic Tac, where it's just sitting in the middle of the screen real quiet. So he does that, and he goes through. If you watch the video, if we had it, I'd go through it with you. But they go through all the different modes. So he goes, it's an IR and an EO. EO is TV. It's black and white TV camera.
We can get the video right online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's get the video, Jamie. Where would you? Can't show it to anybody. We can't show it on YouTube, but you can see it, and people will be able to go to it. You know what we'll do? Go to the video, and we'll tell people when we're starting, and we'll tell people what the title of the video that you get to is, and they can sync it up themselves if they're watching it.
It's publicly owned. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's publicly owned. It's American government released
Right.
it, so it is actually something in the public domain.
So you think we could play it on YouTube and not get pulled?
Yeah.
100%.
You think so, Jamie?
It's a government.
Those things, I would say, yes, we should be able to, but sometimes those things get messy. So
Let's take a chance.
Okay,
Let's take a chance with this one.
I know if you go, if you find a New York Times article, there's a link to it.
It's a Pentagon release.
YouTube is crazy with copyright stuff, and we've always been like 2 steps away from getting pulled off of YouTube completely. It's a real disaster. I understand from their perspective. There's a lot of legal issues they have to deal with, but
I have it on a private server. I could maybe send Jamie.
The issue, I believe, though, is the actual copyright of the video itself.
Oh, it's a Pentagon
released public domain.
And the Pentagon's going to come after us.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Did you find it?
I want to find a good version of the video that doesn't have somebody
Jeremy,
else's
do you know?
copyright.
Yeah, I've got an unwatermarked version. Let me just look it up and send it to you.
Tons of
Jeremy will
watermarks
get
all
it
over
to us.
I have to figure out how to send it to you right here. Give me a second.
Do you have AirDrop? Or could you AirDrop it?
Yeah, but I got it on
a
page. I got it on a page, a private page. I can send Jamie.
Oh yeah, okay. Do you have Jamie's info?
No.
Yeah,
Send.
Okay, I'll figure it
Or
out.
you can send it to me, and I'll send it to him.
Okay,
that's pretty easy. Sorry to disrupt the momentum.
No, you're good.
But I think it's probably important to be able to have this the video itself, so you can just talk about it. And we're about to yank it up here. Okay, Jamie wrote it down for you. There you
thanks. Give me a second to get it out.
Okay. And for people who don't know, Jeremy also produced Bob Lazar, Area 51, and Flying Saucers, and he was in here when we had Bob Lazar in, talk about Bob's experience, and Jesus, if that wasn't a game changer for me and for a lot of other people. This is a subject that it's so easy to mock. This is why I think it's so important that we talk to people like you, because, like I said, just your average, everyday UFO crackpot, they believe everything and anything. Have you ever had any UFO experiences before this?
No, the irony, and I tell this story. My mother-in-law, she'll be listening. She literally, every time I would go home, she would ask me, "Hey, did you see UFO? Did you see UFO?" And I'd be like, "No." And when I first started dating my wife, she was a big National Enquirer. She had all the supermarket tabloids, and I would always just feed her crap for it. So this happens, and I never say a word. So my friends all knew it was a great story over beers because they go, "Hey, what's the coolest thing you ever saw flying?" I go, "I chased a UFO," and they go, "Get out of here!" I go, "No, seriously," and I tell them the story, and they're like, "Dude," I go, "Yeah." So I go home, and I got asked by Lou Elizondo to do the New York Times article, which, as like anything else, I always say no. Like, it took a bunch of times to get me on your show. Jeremy kept asking, and it was...
Thank you, Jeremy.
It was you got to thank my contractor's wife, Angel, who we were at a party drinking, and she goes, "You got to do Rogan." I go, "What?" She goes, "It's the biggest podcast on the planet." She goes, "You got to do it." And I go, "All right, I'm going to do it. Just for you, I'm going to do this show." So,
shout out to Angel.
Yeah, from New Hampshire. So... So my mother-in-law, we're sitting there, and I know the New York Times article is going to come out, and so it was at Thanksgiving when the article came out, 17. So it was Thanksgiving in 2017, and everyone had kind of left the house. So it's just my wife and my in-laws, a couple of us sitting in the kitchen, and I said, "Hey, I got to tell you guys this." They said, "What?" I said, "There's going to be this article comes out in the New York Times, and I'm in it." And they're like, "Yeah." I go, "Well, I chased a UFO." My mother-in-law's like, "Ha ha!" She looks at my father-in-law. He's rolling his eyes, looking at me like, "Oh, are you serious?" And I go, "Yeah, oh, yeah." And she's like, "You never told us." I go, "I never really told anyone." I mean, my wife and kids knew the event happened, but they didn't have all the details because this is one of those things I just didn't get into.
Is it classified?
No.
Was it at any point in time?
No, there's a lot of rumors out there that it was classified and the ship got locked down. No, it wasn't. Men in suits did not show up. No one told us not to talk about it. And this is because there's a lot of other people saying other things. And I said, Let's look at it. Here's the context. So in the battle group, you've got the admiral, you got the captain of the ship, the captain of the Princeton, and then you've got the other COs. So in position-wise, I'm probably, as a CO of a squadron, in the top 20 out of 6,000. And no one came to talk to me. No one came to take my tapes. No one showed up in a suit. No one told me not to talk. No one talked to any of my air crew that were involved in this. There were 6 people total involved, the 2 that shot the video and the 4 of us that looked at it for 5 minutes with our eyes. No one, nothing. It just, and I can get into how, there's a report that George Knapp got released. I call it the unofficial official report. And I had met someone, and I'm like, hey, can you find anything out? I had this incident. And normally you tell people this, they look at you like, dude, what are you smoking? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm tested. And they go, and they said, well, let me see what I can do. And I had got a call. I was doing some aerospace work, and I had gotten a call on my cell phone from a guy. And he said, hey, I want to investigate your incident. And I go, okay. So he did. He investigated the incident, and it was very, very thorough. I mean, if you've read it's about 10 pages long. And he tracked down everybody. He tracked down all the people that were, the air crew that were involved. He tracked down the admiral. It was a pretty thorough report. And I didn't think anything of it, because, the people have worded it's out there, so they want to do FOIA, but it was never released in a FOIA request. I actually had the Navy call me. I'd been out of the Navy for like 6 years. And
let's explain to people that means Freedom of Information Act.
So I got called by a public affairs person from the Navy and said, hey, is this Commander Fravor? And I said, yeah. And they said, hey, do you know of any documentation on your UFO incident off the Nimitz? And I said, official. And she said, yeah. I said, no, because I knew the report existed, but to me it was an unofficial, because I didn't know where it went. And I had a copy of it, but because it wasn't official, well then, years later I find out that the guy who actually did the report was part of the ATIP team, and I was talking to Lou Elizondo, who runs that program, and Lou showed me the documentation of the original, I think it's like 13 people that were part of ATIP, and they were FOIA exempt. And I'm like, well, that's hey, I know that guy. He's the guy that did the report, which is why it never ever came out until George got his hands on it.
How is something Freedom of Information Act exempt?
Obviously, DOD has the ability, because I'm not a conspiracy theory person at all. I mean, I'll just tell you that. And I think there's reasons that the government doesn't tell the public everything. And I don't speak for the government, but I think there's a good reason for that not everything needs to go out to the public. But most of it does. And what they do is they put a clause on, hey, for this program or whatever we're doing, which would have been an ATIP program, the work that they do and what they find it's not releasable through Freedom of Information Act. There's probably other avenues to get that. And then you go, well, what really is freedom of information? Because I got into this I was talking to someone who's a conspiracy theorist, and they said, well, so-and-so wrote, and they're not getting any information on your event. I said, so what are they going to do? They're going to call up, you're going to put in your request for freedom of information. You go, here's what I want. It goes to some poor guy at the Pentagon who's like, I have no idea what this is, and he searches around, he doesn't find anything, he looks at his bud, and I go, for you, I go, hey, Joe, you got anything on the Nimitz incident? And you go, nope. And I go, okay, well, I didn't find anything. I looked, I did my due diligence, but I'm not going to spend the next 6 months of my life doing your research project for you.
Right.
So then you get nothing, and then you assume the government's covering up when the government really isn't. It just, the guys doing the research doesn't know where it's at or doesn't have access to it.
So. Makes sense. Jamie, do we have the video? Okay. Here we go. Now, explain what are we seeing and why are we seeing it in this particular
Okay,
shade?
so we'll just kind of go around. So if you look at the OPRs operate in the top left corner. NAR is narrow field of view, which is zoomed in. IR at the top middle, it means it's in infrared mode. So instead of seeing color, you're seeing temperature variations. And these things are extremely sensitive to in like tenths of degrees. They will tell you the difference due to color. So it'll go from black to white. So in this case, white is hot. So if you look down in the bottom left corner, it says WHT. That's white. It means white is hot. So the object that you're looking at is hotter than the sky around it. But what you also notice is there's no plumes. Now, if you're looking at an airplane, when you get closer, you'll actually see the exhaust coming out, and there will be a really glowing plume. That's important as we look at the video. And then most of the stuff on here, you really don't need to know. What you can look at is the bottom right corner, it says 19,990 and a B. That's the altitude. And if you look up in the little words where it says HDG and then BALT, it's autopilot. So it's on altitude hold. It's just flying for that. So you can go ahead and play the video. And so those two bars next to the white object, that's a passive track. So what he's done is he's commanded the FLIR to track that. So what the system does is it uses, it's actually tracking, it can track pixels, and it's just basically blocked those hot pixels, those white pixels from the black ones. And then you're gonna see now, pause it real quick. So up at the top, see it went to a white screen with the black object. This is a black and white TV mode. And if you look at the top, it says TV. So narrow in TV mode is actually, you can get closer.
Do you know, it's going to be quicker to just move this, isn't it?
TV mode. So there you can get closer with the TV mode. So as you look at it now, in this case, you would actually start to see stuff going on. And even in TV mode, because you get exhaust, you know, the black exhaust that comes out, you'll usually be able to see kind of some of that coming out of the back end. You don't see it. This thing's just sitting there. And if you look at the top where it says 3 right, that's the pod is looking 3 degrees right of the nose of the airplane, right? So he's just flying along. The bottom numbers, don't worry, those are time. So it's 41:56. So go ahead and hit play. And what he's doing is Chad's going through all the different modes because he's like, oh, I got it. And he's going to try and see the best video that he can get. Now, there's rumors that this video is like 10 minutes long. No, what you're looking at is the entire video. Now, notice where it says 99.9. So hit pause real quick. What that means is while he's got the pod, the targeting pod, because that's his primary sensor right now, the radar is still trying to look at this object and trying to range it, and the radar can't get ranging. So the object is doing something to say, I'm not giving you back, because it's just a Doppler radar, just like a police radar is a Doppler. It's trying to get a ranging on you, and it can't do it. So when it says 99.9, the radar cannot see this object right now. It's not allowing it to get ranging.
And I think that's super important, Dave, the way he explained it to me. Active jamming compared to passive jamming. This is a technology that is actively jamming this system.
Rather than something like stealth aircraft, which is the shape and the texture of the...
Yeah, it's... Because everyone thinks stealth is invisible. It's not. It's a technology to basically make it harder for radars to see you. You know, and that's the whole thing. You know, if you look at, you know, airplanes that are nose on are harder to see than airplanes at the side. It's kind of like, think of a barn door. If you're looking at the whole barn door, it's really easy to see. If I turn the barn door sideways where it's really thin, it's going to be a lot harder for you to see it.
Got it.
So that's the easiest, most basic way to look at this. So keep going. You can play again. And you can look, the airplane is still sitting at 20,000 feet. It's doing 250 knots. He's going to go through different modes and try and lock it. And it's just kind of sitting, and all of a sudden, as the video goes on, I think it's a minute.
Deploy landing gear.
See, it's going to try and reacquire. It recenters the pod, so it's slowly drifting to the left. The Hornet is still going the same heading, just kind of hanging out, and they're just filming this thing. And then when they get close, it's going to
deploy landing gear.
When you see it on a full, because this, you know, you think digital, you'd be able to get a 1-for-1 copy, unlike, you know, when you copy your album to a
gear down.
You still do it digital. It often goes to the left, and that's pretty fast to leave that field of view. When we have big monitors that we look at these when they come back, so we're looking at the original tapes. So
play the end of that again, please, Jim. So when it's taking off, how fast? When it just sort of like leaves the field of view and takes off to the left, how fast is that going?
I would say pretty fast. It's an estimate. If we had ranging, you know, you could obviously do the triangle and go, hey, because we know how big the field of view is. But for something to leave the field of view that fast with the pod just staring is pretty fast. I mean, it's like out of here.
Like nothing that we have?
No, because we can't. I don't care what airplane it is. So let's just use the F-22 Raptor. That's probably one of the. It's probably the best airplane in the world right now, performance-wise. It can't take off like that, especially if it's a hover. I mean, you're talking something that's just sitting in space in the wind, and then it just all of a sudden accelerates. Airplanes don't work that way.
And it's not leaving any exhaust plume.
No, notice there's none. And when you go back to the IR
at the end.
Even in the IR, you don't.
Yeah, see, there's IR zoomed in, and there's no. You would see a plume if that was an airplane.
It's creepy how it takes off.
Yeah.
With active jamming, it's intelligently controlled. There's no rotors, there's no plumes, there's no exhaust, there's no tail fin, there's no tail number. This thing goes from a standstill, takes off. It's a propulsion system we don't have in our inventory, and no other nation does. That's how it's understood by the government.
Now that's so if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do that same maneuver, this system would be able to track it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it would stay with it until it got to the limits of the pod, you know, as far as looking to the left. But
right.
And, you know, the radar would see it. I mean, when you get close enough, you're gonna, you know, everything becomes visible.
Right, guys. I can mention it is a short stream tonight, but thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you all very, very soon. Much love and peace out.
It's like when we saw it disappear when it flew in front of my nose. And I'm talking something, I'm within a half mile of it, looking at it.